The road leading to the old hill was quiet when Aram stepped down from the bus. The sky was covered with dark clouds and a soft wind moved through the empty fields. Aram held a small bag and looked at the long path ahead. It had been years since he had last seen this place. He remembered coming here as a child with his father, but the memories were faint. Now, the mansion on the hill belonged to him because his late uncle had written his name in the will. His family had laughed when they heard it. They believed Aram had received trouble instead of fortune. They said the mansion was ruined and worthless. Aram did not argue with them. He rarely argued with anyone. He believed life had a strange way of showing value where others saw none. Aram walked slowly, taking in the silence of the land around him. He was a simple man who worked long hours in a small workshop. He did not earn much, but he lived with patience. The idea of having a mansion, even a broken one, felt unreal to him. As he approached the hill, he saw the first glimpse of the structure through the trees. The mansion looked old and tired with dark patches on the walls, broken windows, and a roof that sagged in the middle. Wild plants had grown around it, covering the stone pathways and reaching toward the walls like long fingers. He reached the front gate and pushed it open. The metal made a low sound as if it had not been moved for many years. Aram walked through the garden, which looked more like a jungle. There were broken stone statues half hidden in the tall grass. He wondered if they had once been part of a beautiful entrance. A large fountain stood at the center, dry and cracked. Still, something about the place felt grand. The size of the mansion, even in its ruined state, gave a sense of forgotten pride. Aram climbed the steps and placed his hand on the heavy wooden door. The wood felt cold. He pushed gently and the door opened with surprising ease. Dust floated into the air as he walked inside. The entrance hall was big with high ceilings and long staircases leading upward. A large chandelier hung in the center, but many of its glass pieces were broken. Sunlight slipped through cracked windows and formed narrow beams on the floor. The atmosphere felt still, as if the house had held its breath for years. Aram placed his bag on a small table and began exploring. He moved through each room, taking slow steps and paying attention to every detail. There were old chairs, broken paintings, and shelves filled with books that had turned yellow with time. Some rooms smelled like old wood, while others smelled like damp stone. The mansion was damaged, but Aram noticed that the structure was stronger than people believed. The walls were thick, and the main beams looked steady. He wondered why his uncle had lived here alone for so many years. As he walked through a long hallway, he saw a large portrait hanging on the wall. It showed his uncle as a young man. The man in the painting wore a confident smile and stood beside a tall metal chest with strange symbols on it. Aram had never seen that object in real life. He touched the edge of the frame and felt a slight vibration from somewhere behind the wall. He stepped back and listened carefully. The sound came again, very soft but real. Aram followed the sound and noticed a bookshelf that did not fit perfectly into the wall. He pushed it slightly. To his surprise, it moved with a gentle slide, revealing a narrow passage behind it. The dust on the floor was minimal, which meant someone had used this passage not too long ago. Aram felt a mix of fear and curiosity. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The hidden passage led to a small stone room with a lantern hanging from the ceiling. The lantern still had oil and a clean glass cover. This confused him. Why would an unused mansion have a clean lantern in a secret room? At the center of the room was a large wooden chest reinforced with metal. The chest had the same symbols he had seen in the painting. Aram approached it slowly. His heart beat faster as he knelt beside it. He placed his hand on the lid and felt a warm sensation as if the metal had been touched recently. He lifted the lid. A soft golden glow filled the room. Inside were carefully arranged items. There were old documents, maps, coins, and several metal pieces shaped in odd forms. Some items looked like they came from the past century, while others looked like parts of machines. Aram picked up a thick file. The top page had a title written in clear handwriting. It said Project Horizon. He opened it and began reading. The documents described his uncle's research over many years. Aram learned that the land under the mansion had a hidden mineral deposit that had been forgotten by time. The mineral was rare and extremely valuable. The notes said that the deposit was large enough to change the value of the entire property. Aram could not believe what he was reading. He turned the pages slowly. The handwriting spoke about old land rights, surveys, and hidden entrances to underground tunnels. As he reached the final page of the file, he found a message written directly to him. His uncle had known he would inherit the mansion. The message said that the world had overlooked this land for too long. It said the mansion held secrets far more important than people understood. It asked him to study everything carefully and stay cautious because not everyone could be trusted. Aram closed the file and sat quietly for a moment. His uncle had lived alone for many years, and now Aram understood why. The mansion was not a ruin. It was a shield hiding something powerful. Aram looked around the secret room again, feeling a new sense of responsibility. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky and rain began to fall harder. The sound echoed through the old walls. Aram carefully closed the chest and stood up. He felt different. He had arrived thinking he had inherited a place of trouble, but instead he had uncovered a mystery that could change his future. His family had mocked him for receiving a broken mansion. They would never believe what he had just found. They would never expect that the land they laughed at might be worth more than anything they owned. Aram left the secret room and slid the bookshelf back into place. He looked around the hall again with new eyes. This was no longer a ruined house. This was the beginning of a journey filled with secrets, danger, and unexpected discoveries. He did not know where this path would lead him. He only knew one thing. He was ready to follow it.
Aram woke early the next morning, long before sunrise. The rain had stopped during the night, and a cold silence covered the mansion. He lay awake for a few minutes, replaying every detail of what he had discovered in the hidden room. The chest, the documents, the strange symbols, and the message from his uncle all felt unreal. He had never imagined his life could take such a turn. A day earlier, he was a simple man with a simple job. Now he stood on land that carried secrets worth more than he had ever dreamed. He stood up and walked toward the main hall. The floor creaked under his feet. He looked around at the long corridors, the broken furniture, and the dust that floated in the air. The mansion looked empty, yet Aram could not shake the feeling that someone had lived here with purpose, not loneliness. Every hidden symbol, every locked drawer, and every sealed corner suggested that his uncle had been protecting something important for many years. Aram decided to clean the entrance hall first. He gathered an old broom from a storage room and swept slowly. The work calmed his thoughts. While cleaning, he noticed small metal plates fixed to the floor near the staircase. They were almost invisible under dust and debris. He knelt to get a closer look. The plates had the same symbols he had seen on the chest. Aram touched one plate gently. To his surprise, it moved slightly under pressure. He pressed it again. This time a soft click echoed through the hall. Another click followed from the wall near him. Aram stepped back with caution. The floor beside the staircase started to shift. A square section of wooden planks moved downward and slid aside, forming an opening. A dark staircase led underground. Aram took a deep breath. He felt fear, but he also felt drawn to the unknown. He picked up a lantern from the storage room, lit it carefully, and held it in front of him. The flame shone on the first few steps, showing a thin layer of dust. The place had not been opened in years. He stepped inside slowly. The air felt colder and slightly damp as he descended. The underground passage was narrow with stone walls on both sides. Strange symbols were carved along the path, and metal pipes ran through the ceiling. Aram wondered how his uncle had built such a structure alone. The deeper he went, the more he understood that his uncle must have been involved in something far larger than family stories had ever revealed. After several minutes of walking, he reached a large underground chamber. The lantern light spread across the room, revealing workbenches, metal racks, maps pinned to walls, and several locked boxes. There were tools arranged neatly, and dust covered everything evenly. The place looked like a secret workshop frozen in time. Aram set the lantern down and explored slowly. He found a large map spread across a wooden table. The map showed the entire hill area, including the mansion and surrounding land. Red lines marked underground routes, while blue circles highlighted several points under the soil. One of those circles was directly under the mansion. Written beside it was a note from his uncle describing the mineral hidden deep underground. Aram traced the lines with his finger, trying to understand the routes. The tunnels extended far beyond the house, suggesting that his uncle had discovered more than one hidden deposit. Next to the map was a journal. Aram opened it and began reading. His uncle had recorded every step of his research. The early pages spoke of excitement when he first discovered unusual readings under the land. Later pages described secret surveys, tests, and tools he used to explore the underground layers. Then came pages filled with concern. His uncle wrote about people asking strange questions and following him. The entries warned about trusting no one. Aram paused for a moment. He imagined his uncle working alone in these tunnels, protecting a secret while living in silence. It made Aram feel heavy, but also proud. He placed the journal back carefully. A locked metal box caught his attention next. It was small but heavy, with a keyhole shaped like the same symbols from the painting. Aram searched the workbench and found a key wrapped in cloth. He placed it into the lock and turned it gently. The box opened with a soft click. Inside were documents that looked more official than the journal. Some were certificates, others were ownership papers, and several were land rights dating back many decades. These papers proved that the mansion land had been in the family for generations. They also showed legal ownership of underground resources. Aram held the documents in his hands and felt a wave of disbelief. If the mineral deposit was as valuable as the documents claimed, then his family had been sitting on a fortune without ever knowing it. He placed everything back carefully and continued exploring. Another shelf held a collection of metal samples inside glass containers. Aram lifted one gently. The metal had a strange shine, different from anything he had seen. It was light but strong. A note beside the container said that the mineral had industrial value worth unimaginable amounts if processed correctly. Aram realized that the world outside would give anything to get their hands on it. He looked around the workshop again and noticed a large steel door at the far end of the chamber. The door had a circular wheel in the center and more symbols carved along the edges. Aram approached it slowly. The door felt too heavy for one person, but the wheel moved with surprising ease when he tried turning it. As he rotated it, the metal locks inside shifted with a deep sound. The door opened slightly. Aram pushed it wider and stepped inside. The room beyond was colder and darker. His lantern illuminated rows of wooden crates stacked neatly. Some crates were open, revealing equipment, tools, and sealed jars of minerals. The most striking object was a machine standing tall at the center. It looked half-complete with wires, gears, and metal parts arranged around it. Aram could not understand its purpose. A set of instructions was pinned nearby. They described a device designed to scan underground layers with extreme accuracy. It seemed his uncle had built it to locate the exact depth of the mineral deposit. Aram felt overwhelmed. Every corner of the underground chamber held something valuable or mysterious. This was no ordinary inheritance. It was a legacy of knowledge, risk, and hidden power. Aram touched the side of the machine gently. He wondered how his uncle had managed to gather all this. More importantly, he wondered why no one else knew about it. A sudden sound made Aram freeze. It was faint, like a soft thud from above. He held the lantern tighter and listened. The sound came again. Someone was walking on the mansion floor. Aram felt his heart race. The property was far from the town. No one should be here. He extinguished the lantern quickly, plunging the underground room into darkness. He moved back through the chamber and stood near the stairs, listening. Footsteps echoed from the hall above, slow and heavy. Aram did not know if it was a stranger or someone from his family who had come to mock him again. Whatever the reason, the timing was suspicious. If anyone found the underground chambers, everything would be at risk. Aram waited in silence, planning his next move. The mansion had been peaceful when he arrived. Now it felt as if the outside world had sensed the value hidden beneath the floor. He understood one thing clearly. The secret was no longer safe. Aram stayed in complete darkness at the bottom of the hidden staircase, listening to the slow movement above him. He could not see anything, but his ears caught every sound. The footsteps were steady, not rushed, which made them even more disturbing. Whoever had entered the mansion was confident. They walked as if they had a reason to be there. Aram held his breath and stepped back into the shadows of the underground passage. For a moment, the footsteps stopped. The silence felt heavier than the darkness around him. Then the sound began again, this time heading toward the staircase that led to the secret chamber. Aram's heart started beating faster. He wondered if the visitor knew about the underground room, or if they were exploring the house at random. Either way, he could not risk being discovered in this hidden place. He needed to think fast. Aram moved quietly through the workshop area. His hand brushed against the stone wall as he tried to memorize the path. He reached the steel door that led to the room with the crates and the half-built machine. Without making a sound, he slipped inside and pulled the door closed behind him. The room was darker than before because the lantern was still extinguished. He pressed his back against the wall and focused on the faint sounds coming from the staircase above. The footsteps reached the secret entrance. He heard wood creaking and something being pushed aside. It sounded like the bookshelf in the hall was moving. Aram felt a cold shiver run down his spine. That meant the visitor knew exactly where to look. This was no random intruder. This person had knowledge about the mansion, maybe even knowledge about his uncle. Aram waited in silence as the footsteps slowly descended the staircase. Each step echoed faintly in the underground chamber. Whoever it was carried a light because Aram saw a small glow at the bottom of the staircase, leaking under the steel door. He kept still, holding his breath. The footsteps reached the main underground workshop. Aram heard the visitor pause, likely noticing the map, the tools, and the documents scattered on the table. The intruder walked around the chamber, examining everything. Aram could hear the soft rustle of paper being touched. Then the visitor moved toward the steel door Aram was hiding behind. Aram braced himself, hoping the person would not open it. The footsteps stopped right outside. For a moment, Aram feared the door would swing open, but then the sound of movement shifted away. The visitor walked toward the stairs again. Aram could hear the person climbing back to the hall. Finally, the footsteps grew faint, suggesting they left the mansion. Aram waited 5 full minutes before daring to step out of the hidden room. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the door. He walked into the workshop and saw footprints in the dust. The visitor had not taken anything, but they had looked closely at everything. Aram felt a mix of relief and fear. Someone knew of the secret now. Someone had a plan, and Aram was not ready for it. He climbed the stairs slowly and slid the bookshelf back into place. When he entered the hall, he saw muddy footprints leading to the front door. Outside, the morning light had begun to rise. Aram stepped onto the porch and looked around the yard. The gate was slightly open. Whoever had come had not tried to hide their path. They wanted Aram to know that they had been inside. Aram locked the door and returned to the hall. He took a deep breath and sat on a dusty chair. The mansion was no longer just a secret inheritance. It had become a target. The discovery underground was valuable enough to attract attention, maybe even danger. Aram understood that he needed to protect the land, the documents, and everything his uncle had left behind. He spent the next hours going through the journal again, searching for clues. One entry caught his attention. It mentioned a man his uncle did not trust. The writing said that this man had tried to buy the land many times and had grown angry when the offer was refused. Aram wondered if the visitor was connected to that person. Maybe they had been watching the mansion, waiting for the right moment to explore it. Aram knew he could not stay silent about the intrusion. He walked to the village at the bottom of the hill. It was a small place with a few shops and friendly faces. People recognized him and greeted him kindly, remembering him from his childhood visits. Aram stopped at a small store owned by an elderly man named Ralph. He asked if anyone had come looking for the mansion recently. Ralph stroked his beard and thought for a moment. He then nodded. He told Aram that a stranger had passed through the village 2 days earlier. The man had asked questions about the hill, the mansion, and the late uncle. Ralph described him as a quiet man with serious eyes who avoided long conversations. Aram felt a knot tighten in his stomach. That description matched the type of person his uncle had warned about. Aram thanked Ralph and headed back to the mansion. He now knew the visitor had not come by accident. The intruder had been searching for the secret long before Aram arrived. The minerals, the underground chambers, and the machine were all part of something far bigger. Aram realized he had little time to understand everything before someone else tried to claim it. Back at the mansion, he went straight to the underground chamber again. He studied the machine closely. Though it looked complicated, the instructions left by his uncle were clear. The device was meant to scan underground layers and locate the mineral deposits with high precision. If Aram could finish building it, he could learn exactly where the deposits were. That knowledge would give him power. It would also help him protect the land. Aram gathered tools from the workshop. He spent hours tightening bolts, connecting wires, and assembling the unfinished parts. He followed each step carefully. The work was slow, but Aram felt a sense of purpose. Every movement brought him closer to understanding his uncle's secret. Every bolt he tightened felt like a shield against the unknown visitor. By late afternoon, Aram had connected most of the main components. Only a few pieces remained, stored in a separate crate. He reached inside and lifted a small metal panel. Underneath, he found another envelope addressed to him. Aram opened it with trembling hands. The letter inside was short but clear. It said the machine could only be activated once all parts were connected. It also warned that once the machine was used, the readings would not stay hidden. People watching the land would know something had changed. Aram realized that the machine was powerful, but also dangerous. Finishing it meant revealing the secret to anyone tracking the area. Aram stared at the half-built machine. He understood now that he was walking on a thin line. He could not move too fast or too slow. He needed a plan that would keep him safe while also uncovering the truth. He was still thinking about this when he heard a distant sound outside the mansion. It was the sound of a car engine, slow and steady, approaching the hill. Aram set the letter down and rushed to the hall. Through a cracked window, he saw a black car moving toward the gate. His heart sank. The visitor had returned, and this time they were not hiding their arrival. The secret under the mansion was no longer safe. The real challenge was about to begin. Aram stood near the window with his heartbeat rising as the black car rolled slowly toward the mansion gate. The sky had turned pale with evening light, and the shadows in the garden had grown long and silent. Aram felt the weight of the moment. He had known this day would come, yet he had hoped for more time. The intruder who had walked through the mansion earlier had returned, and this time the person arrived without caution. This meant one thing. They were confident they would get what they wanted. Aram stepped back from the window and moved quietly through the hall. He did not want to look afraid, but he also knew he had no reason to feel brave. He walked to the underground entrance and made sure the hidden staircase was closed properly. If the visitor came inside again, Aram could not allow them to discover the machine, the minerals, or the papers. He covered the pressure plate on the floor with dust and debris so it looked untouched. The sound of the car door echoed outside. Aram took a deep breath and walked to the front door. When he opened it, a tall man stood outside with a calm expression. The man wore a clean coat, polished shoes, and glasses that reflected the orange light from the setting sun. His face was hard to read. He carried no visible anger, but something in his eyes showed strong determination. The man spoke first. He introduced himself as Cameron and said he had known Aram's uncle many years ago. His voice was smooth, but Aram noticed the slight coldness beneath it. Cameron said he had heard about the inheritance and came to congratulate Aram. However, the tone of his words suggested more than good wishes. Aram nodded politely, but did not invite him inside. Cameron looked around the yard and commented on the mansion's condition. His gaze lingered on the windows and cracked walls as if studying every corner. Aram felt a growing tension in his chest. He asked Cameron why he had come now when he had not visited the mansion for years. Cameron smiled in a way that did not feel friendly. He said he had unfinished matters with Aram's uncle, matters related to land ownership. He claimed that Aram's uncle had promised to sell the land before his passing. Aram knew this was not true. The documents in the underground chamber clearly showed that the land was protected for the family. Aram kept his face calm and asked for proof of Cameron's claim. Cameron did not answer directly. Instead, he took a slow step forward and asked again if he could look inside the mansion. Aram felt a surge of alarm. He refused politely, saying the place was not safe for visitors. Cameron's eyes narrowed slightly, but he did not argue. He stepped back and observed Aram closely. It was clear he did not believe Aram's words. He could sense that Aram was hiding something. Before leaving, Cameron said he would return with official papers to discuss the land. His voice remained steady, but his gaze carried a message. He was not going to stop. He walked back to the car and drove away, leaving Aram standing at the doorway with a racing heart. Aram locked the door and leaned against it. The silence in the mansion felt heavier now. Cameron's visit confirmed that the intruder from the morning had been connected to him. Aram knew he had only a short amount of time before Cameron returned with more force or more people. He could not allow anyone to take the land or the secret hidden beneath it. Aram returned to the underground chamber with a lantern. He studied the machine again. The instructions from his uncle became clearer now. Once the device was activated, it would send signals that revealed the exact size of the mineral deposit. That information could change everything. But it would also alert those watching the land. Aram understood that he had to finish the process before Cameron returned. Knowledge was the only shield he had. Aram worked late into the night. He connected wires, polished metal plates, tightened bolts, and tested each part. The underground chamber echoed with the soft sounds of tools and his footsteps. He followed every line of the instructions carefully. The air felt cold, but alive with purpose. Aram felt closer to his uncle than he had ever felt before. It was as if the man had left behind a path for him to follow. Hours passed. Finally, Aram installed the last panel into the machine. The device now stood complete, tall and silent like a guardian waiting to wake. Aram rested his hands on the surface and closed his eyes. He knew that activating it would draw attention. But he also knew that without understanding the full truth, he would be helpless against Cameron and anyone else who wanted the land. Aram pulled the lever gently. The machine began to hum with a low vibration. A warm light spread across its surface. The symbols on the edges glowed faintly as the gears inside rotated. Aram stepped back and watched with wide eyes. The machine projected a soft beam onto the underground map. It scanned the layers beneath the hill slowly, sending readings onto the surface of a metal plate beside it. The results appeared one by one. The mineral deposit was far larger than the documents had suggested. It extended deep into the land and connected to tunnels that branched out like roots. The value of the deposit was unimaginable. Aram felt breathless. His uncle had been protecting a treasure that could change the future of entire industries. The truth was far bigger than Aram had expected. But as the machine continued its scan, something strange happened. The ground above shook lightly. Aram looked up. He realized that the machine's signal might be alerting people outside. Cameron or someone connected to him might sense the disturbance. Aram quickly recorded the readings and turned the machine off. The light faded and the room returned to silence. He returned to the hall and opened the door cautiously. The night was quiet, but the air felt tense. Aram stepped outside and looked around. The village below the hill was dark and calm. The trees around the mansion stood unmoving. Yet a strange feeling grew inside him. Something was coming. He could sense it the same way his uncle must have sensed danger in the past. Aram went back inside and packed the most important documents into a small metal case. He hid the case under one of the loose floorboards in the hall. If someone broke in, he wanted at least some part of the secret protected. He then sat on the staircase and waited for dawn. Morning arrived slowly. Aram saw the sun rise behind distant hills. He felt tired but determined. His uncle's secret was now his responsibility, and he understood the true weight of that legacy. Around mid-morning, Aram heard another sound from outside. This time it was not a car. It was multiple vehicles approaching the hill. Aram stood at the window and saw 2 cars and a truck moving toward the mansion. Cameron had returned, and he had not come alone. Aram took a deep breath. The moment he feared had arrived. The fight for the land and the truth was about to begin. He stepped away from the window and prepared himself. The final part of the story was waiting. Morning light spread across the old mansion as Aram stood near the window, watching the vehicles climb the hill. His hands were steady, even though his heart carried the weight of everything that had happened. 2 black cars moved slowly, followed by a truck. The presence of the truck made him uneasy. It meant Cameron had not come only to talk. He had come prepared to remove whatever stood between him and the land. Aram walked away from the window and moved toward the hall. The house felt strange now, as if it understood that something important was about to happen. The wooden floor creaked under his steps, and the air carried a heavy silence. Aram was not experienced in confronting people, yet he felt calm. He had something Cameron did not have. He had truth on his side, and he had the legacy of his uncle that now lived inside him. The vehicles stopped near the broken fountain. Doors opened, and several men stepped out. Cameron emerged last. He wore the same composed expression, but the seriousness in his eyes had grown stronger. The men beside him did not look like officials. They looked more like hired workers ready for a job that needed no questions. Aram opened the front door before they could knock. The cold morning breeze touched his face, carrying the smell of damp grass. Cameron greeted him politely, but the tone was heavy with pressure. He handed Aram a folder filled with papers. Cameron claimed these documents proved his right to take control of the land. Aram scanned the files and noticed the dates, signatures, and statements were manipulated. Nothing was real. It was all an attempt to frighten him. Aram closed the folder and returned it calmly. He said the land belonged to his family and that the documents Cameron brought meant nothing. The men behind Cameron grew restless. Cameron sighed and stepped closer. He warned Aram that refusing to cooperate would lead to trouble. He claimed he knew the value buried beneath the land and said Aram had no power to stop people like him. Aram did not respond with anger. He stepped forward and told Cameron that his uncle had left everything to him, and his uncle's work proved the true ownership. Cameron's expression changed when Aram mentioned the research. His eyes narrowed. He understood then that Aram knew everything. The underground chambers, the mineral deposit, the machine, the maps, the files. Everything his uncle had spent years protecting. Cameron signaled his men toward the mansion. Aram blocked the doorway. He said no one would enter without permission. Cameron hesitated for a moment. He had expected fear. Instead, Aram stood with a calm strength that unsettled him. Cameron stepped back and announced he would bring authorities and legal pressure. He walked away slowly, as if changing his plan. But Aram noticed a second group of men moving toward the back of the mansion. Cameron was pretending to leave while others tried to sneak inside. Aram rushed through the hall and reached the back door just in time to see 2 men trying to force it open. He shouted at them to stop. They turned, surprised that he had discovered them so quickly. Aram knew he could not fight them physically. Instead, he used the knowledge he had gained from the underground chamber. He warned them that the land was dangerous and that entering without understanding the structure inside could lead to a collapse. He pointed to old support beams and cracks in the stone walls. His words made the men uneasy. They stepped back, unsure if he was telling the truth. Meanwhile, Cameron noticed the hesitation and grew frustrated. He shouted at his men to continue, but Aram stepped out and demanded everyone stop. The men paused again. Something in Aram's voice carried authority. Perhaps it was the confidence he had gained from uncovering the secret. Perhaps it was the legacy of his uncle speaking through him. Whatever it was, Cameron felt the shift. Aram walked to the center of the yard and said clearly that the land was protected by legal documents, recorded surveys, and registered rights passed down through generations. He said everything was stored safely and copies had already been sent to trusted people. He lied about the copies, but Cameron did not know that. Aram continued. He told Cameron that if he tried anything unlawful, it would damage him more than it would damage the mansion. Cameron grew silent. For the first time, doubt entered his mind. He told his men to return to the vehicles. They followed quietly. Cameron stared at Aram for a long moment before saying that this matter was not over. Then he turned and left. The vehicles drove away slowly. The path cleared once more. Aram stood in the open yard and watched the dust settle behind the retreating truck. He felt a long breath escape his chest. He knew Cameron might return with another plan, but Aram had won this moment. He had protected the mansion and everything beneath it. Aram stepped inside the house and closed the door. The silence that followed felt different from the silence before. It felt peaceful now. He walked to the underground chamber again and looked at the machine. The information he had gathered from the scans still lay on the metal plate. He read the details carefully. The deposit under the land was enormous. The mineral had unique properties that could transform industries, energy systems, and scientific research. Aram realized something important. The value was not only in money. It held possibilities that could help people beyond his imagination. But it also held risks. If the wrong hands got control of it, the discovery could be used for purposes his uncle had feared. Aram knew he needed guidance. He could not handle this alone. He contacted a trusted research group recommended in his uncle's journal. The journal mentioned them as honest people who valued safety and responsibility. Aram sent them a message describing his situation and requested a meeting. He did not mention the exact location or details, only the context of the discovery and its potential importance. Days passed. During this time, Aram repaired parts of the mansion and cleaned rooms slowly. He did not want the past to fade inside the dust of neglect. He wanted the mansion to live again. The place no longer felt like a ruined structure. It felt like a guardian of history and truth. One morning, Aram received a reply. The research group agreed to visit under strict privacy. When they arrived, they listened carefully to Aram's explanation. He guided them through the underground chamber and showed them everything. The scientists examined the samples and reviewed the data gathered by the machine. Their faces changed from curiosity to astonishment. They confirmed the deposit was rare and worth far more than Aram imagined. They praised his uncle's work and told Aram that his inheritance held scientific value that could benefit the world. They also assured him that they would help secure legal protection and ensure the land would never fall into the wrong hands. Weeks later, official surveys and reports revealed the true value of the land. The mineral deposit was estimated at nearly $200 million. Newspapers wrote about the historical discovery, but Aram's name was kept private by choice. The mansion was restored with help from the research group, and Aram began managing the estate with dignity and peace. When his family heard about the discovery, they were shocked beyond words. The same people who had laughed at him now stood speechless, unable to understand how the ruined mansion had become a treasure. Aram did not boast. He did not shame them. He simply said he had followed his uncle's path with honesty. Standing at the top of the hill months later, Aram looked at the mansion with gratitude. He had inherited more than money. He had inherited courage, wisdom, and a legacy built on truth. The mansion no longer felt ruined. It felt alive with purpose. The world had doubted him. His family had laughed. But the truth hidden under the old stone floors had changed everything. Aram had protected his uncle's secret. And in doing so, he had discovered himself.